Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. E nā mana, e nā rio, e nā manahiri, nā mihi nui, kia koutou katoa. Ko, Andrew Knight, ahu. One of the great Maori traditions is to begin a business meeting with a story about who you are and where you come from. Only when people know each other's values do we move on to specifics. Since our industry places enduring partnerships at the centre of our activity, we can usefully adapt this tradition. Putting relationships and values first is part of what it means to be doing things in a distinctly New Zealand way. Our story begins in an ancient Maori legend about a great chief from Polynesia, countless generations ago. His name was Kupe. The story begins, as so many perfect days do. Kupe was out fishing. Unfortunately, this day was different. He was catching nothing. When he pulled up his lines, all his bait had been taken. The next day, the same thing. His lines would go in, his bait was gone, and no catch. Eventually, he discovered a great octopus was taking his bait and eating his catch. So Kupe decided to catch the octopus, and a great pursuit commenced. He provisioned his boat, and he set out for the horizon. Eventually, his chase led him to New Zealand, where the prized octopus was caught. Kupe spent a long time exploring the new land he had found, and then eventually he returned home to bring others back. He told them of its rivers, of travelling from harbour to harbour, of greenstone, Pounamu in the South Island, and richness on the land. He told of planting a tree at the mouth of a river opening to the southwest wind, beneath a snow-clad mountain standing near the sea. Direct your canoe there, and you will see the best place to settle, he said. And so the first New Zealanders were explorers who travelled here of a prize beneath the sea. Kupe's legend is a story of New Zealand's strengths and our place in the international context. From Kupe to Captain Cook, to the sealers and settlers, to our newest arrivals, every family in these lands has a story of travel, a story of starting over, a story of exploration. People who aren't from New Zealand or haven't visited here often don't realise that everything here arrived either by swimming, flying, or drifting further than anyone else. That's why New Zealanders breed explorers. We were the first to the sailing of the world. We circle the world in racing yachts, and we pioneer extreme sports. About 1,000 years after Kupe, maybe a little bit more or less, a gunsmith named Edward Smith found some oil on Taranaki Beach. His discovery inspired a new generation of explorers. And one day, many years later, many discoveries later, in Taranaki southwest, in full view of a mountain standing near the sea, they found an oil and gas field, and we called it Kupe. Today, New Zealand Oil and Gas is proud to earn a substantial portion of our income from Kupe. We are literally explorers to our core. Just as then, as now, we recognise that Taranaki is a starting point, but there is abundance beyond. New Zealand is geologically complex and full of promise. Yet for all its prospective resources, New Zealand is also relatively underexplored. Exciting new discoveries are waiting in new basins. We are excited about what we have seen off the Canterbury coast. We know there are resources in the Great South Basin and in deep water around New Zealand that is almost totally unsearched. Others at this conference will talk about the prospectivity of these basins. What I want to focus on is what it will take in a business sense to unlock them. There is a technical challenge, but it's much more than that. There is an economic issue in a context where, as Bob outlined, there are other basins in the world. And there is a social and regulatory context capable of valuing success in the oil and gas sector. I'd like to discuss the social and the economic context. Since it was established in 1981, New Zealand Oil and Gas has had enough economic success to graduate from junior to become a producer. What we have learned over the years is that exploring in New Zealand brings its own challenges to a global business. New Zealand requires a cooperative industry to share investment risk, and we have a smaller industry than most countries. New Zealand has a higher cost structure because of the cost of mobilising and a less frequent drilling program. This context, in turn, requires strong partnerships and long-term perspectives. And the need for a strong partnership and a long-term perspective applies to not only us, our partners, the government, but also the communities in which we operate. New Zealand Oil and Gas diversified overseas. We sought to provide balance to our investment portfolio. We're still proving to ourselves that this can be done successfully. No other oil and gas company from New Zealand has yet undertaken this expansion successfully. So to make it work, we need to bring our New Zealand way of doing things, our values and our culture to opportunities. Bringing this perspective is what gets me up in the morning and what makes me excited and passionate about coming to work. The opportunity to contribute to New Zealand is not an abstract concept. It has a real defining meaning in jobs and opportunities. I'd like school kids growing up in Taranaki to understand that there are opportunities for them beneath their feet, and for those kids to study the science and management skills to lead my company in the future. But we can't take for granted that everyone sees our industry as making a contribution. It's easy for us to say we deserve community support for the opportunities we create, but it is harder for us, critical, to understand that we need to earn that community support. The same features of New Zealand's geographical isolation that created the underground resources also created a stunningly beautiful environment. New Zealanders are incredibly proud of it. We have a deep emotional commitment to our way of life we associate with our waters, our mountains, our land, and our rivers. And so while New Zealanders recognise our 40 years of safe operating, we also know the consequence of failure could be desperately high. Our communities fear that they, not us, will bear the consequence if we fail. That's why they seek to ask us searching questions. It's entirely understandable they ask those questions, and our social licence to operate has to be earned repeatedly and continuously by being able to answer their questions satisfactorily. And that's part of forming the long-term community partnerships that we need. I started out by talking about an emerging New Zealand habit of talking about our values when we talk about business. New Zealanders expect to be ethical, to show concern for our neighbours. We expect fairness in dealing, not selfish advantage. We have a love of our unique physical environment, cradled in our understanding that it is not only remote, it is also our home. And we have a tradition of having to be resourceful. We have learned or inherited a sense of adventure and a freedom that a small country has to innovate and be creative. As this conference begins, we have seen some public questioning of our industry. I have also noticed a consistent theme. We're being asked to show the benefit to New Zealand. The reason why I do this, and the reason why I'm proud to lead a New Zealand oil and gas company, is that I believe we do make a difference. The Tui field, in which New Zealand oil and gas has an interest, is a small field by international standards, but over its lifetime it will contribute around $2 billion to royalties and taxes for the Government of New Zealand. That goes to pay for a lot of schools and hospitals. Our international partners make a vital contribution. They bring capital, expertise, and technology that we do not have without them. We could not unlock our resources without our partners. So New Zealanders have a choice between New Zealanders discovering New Zealand's resources for the benefit of New Zealanders, or New Zealanders going offshore to unlock other people's resources for their benefit. That's New Zealand's international context, and it's why I warmly welcome our potential partners entering New Zealand. Our community wants to see the highest standards of environmental performance, health and safety. And so do I. One of the features of New Zealand that helps set us apart and is important for us in attracting staff to New Zealand is our lifestyle and our quality of life. There is a role for government in establishing that it is not seeking a choice between the environment and development. There is also a role in championing the opportunities and wealth that those resources can create for New Zealanders. There's a role in making sure the industry can flex our enterprise and our initiative. And that's why I stress it's important to get the balance right in the allocation of new permits. New Zealand has a lot of competition for explorers' attention, and having more advocates marketing us internationally will help. This is a balance that New Zealand must get right in assessing bids in the blocks offer. What all this amounts to is an international context in which New Zealand provides an unusual set of opportunities. Our isolation has created a unique geological context and a heritage of values that understand and support exploration. But our isolation also means that our star shines more faintly in the global search for exploration. We have to be unusually careful to earn and keep earning trust in our activities, and we must be creative in attracting our partners. For New Zealand Oil and Gas, the New Zealand story is our story. A story of potential that can be unleashed through strong and enduring partnerships. Thank you very much.